How's it going, Waptors? Mr. Lassiter here, getting you, albeit late, your video for the final two sections of Chapter 7, the networks of communication and exchange. So in this lecture we will be covering the Saharan and Sub-Saharan trade system as well as the spread of ideas. Stick with me. Hopefully you will enjoy it. I find this section actually fairly interesting. Especially kind of understanding how a unified culture can be seen in such a diverse region as Sub-Saharan Africa, and also seeing how the spread of religion occurs, especially along the trade routes that we've been talking about. So let's get started by talking about roots across the Sahara and early Saharan cultures. So early Saharan culture, we really have very few sources about this, but what we do have are some rock paintings in desert caves which show an early hunting culture, basically a culture that becomes cattle breeders, believe it or not, in this kind of very early Saharan environment. Now keep in mind that the climate of the Sahara was very different during this time period. Eventually cattle breeders will be driven out, they will move to the south, and they will be succeeded by horse herders. We do have cave paintings showing chariots, so how those chariots arrive, we can't be sure. There are some guesses that they may be from Minoan or Mycenaean culture, who basically escaped to North Africa and then took up in the Sahara. It could be through trade these chariots arrived, but we can't be sure. What we do know is that camel riders followed charioteers, and those camels came to Sub-Saharan Africa from Arabia. Here is an example of some of that Saharan rock art painted on rocks. So there you go. So what about this camel that I was just talking about? We seem to be mentioning camels a lot lately. It was introduced from Arabia. Excuse me, nomads, most likely camel riding nomads, pioneered this trans-Saharan trade route. So basically it's camel riders that are a link between Sub-Saharan and North African trade. It also made it possible for people from the southern highlands of Sahara to roam the desert and establish contact with people in northern Sahara, because these camels could travel long distances. So what did trade across the Sahara, look like? Well, it developed slowly, and it ultimately, there was kind of a southern Saharan trading system, a northern Sahara trading system, and eventually they're linked by those camel riding nomads. Originally, southern Saharan traders, they traded only really with themselves in Sub-Saharan Africa. So desert salts, which were traded for forest products like nuts or palm oil, and your book gives a few more examples. But when southern and northern Saharan trade was linked across this desert, we see then a link from Sub-Saharan to southern to northern Saharan. So these trade routes extending even further. What about North African and European trade? Because we haven't talked a whole lot about African trade. For the most part, we know that people in Rome and in Greece had to trade for a lot of their goods because of the terrain, especially in Greece. But Roman colonists of the north coast of Africa during this time period did export their agricultural products and the wild animals that they raised to Italy. When Rome declines and we see Arabs invade North Africa, and that'll be mainly our next unit, we see the Arab invasion, trade will decline between North Africa and Europe. However, that does not mean it declines within Africa and to Arabia. So that's kind of Sahara and North Africa. So what about the Sub-Saharan region? Well, it's a large area with many different environmental zones and many geographical obstacles to movement. But how large is it? Let's give you an idea of this region, because map projections don't do it justice. Africa could fit all these countries in it. It could fit China, Mexico, Western Europe, Eastern Europe as well, India, the Iberian Peninsula, the United States, and that's just in mainland Africa. Japan is roughly the size of Madagascar, and if you want an idea for how big Japan is, it's about the size of California. So we see here that Sub-Saharan Africa, for the most part, would fit all of India, Europe, and the United States. It is a large region. So it stands that the spread of culture could be varied there, could be very diverse, and that is what we find in Sub-Saharan Africa. Now we also see a difference of a diversity of geography here. So some significant geographical areas that we find. The Sahel, which is kind of that region that divides the Saharan desert with sub-Saharan terrain. We have tropical savanna, tropical rainforest zones, high grassland areas of savanna where farming can be done, steppe and desert below that, and some temperate highlands of South Africa. It's also good to know that, or important to know that since Africa is so large, it certainly has a lot of different zones north and south. You can see mainly a lot of these depend on where it is in relation to the equator. The southern tip of Africa is approximately the same distance from the equator as Greece is north of the equator. If you need kind of a reference point, the equator runs about where my mouse is running now. So of course, if we have geographic diversity, most likely we're going to see cultural diversity, and we do in Africa. There's no overarching great tradition that we see in some of these other societies, but there are a collection of smaller traditions. And by looking at these small traditions, even though we don't really know a whole lot about where they came from, we can see some form of cultural unity. Again, if I'm moving too fast, feel free to pause the video, rewind it. We do see highly diverse culture. For example, there are estimated 2,000 languages spoken in sub-Saharan Africa. And we see that these smaller traditions last for a long time because there's not really a power that comes in and takes over Africa. There's no foreign power that conquers it and says, you're part of the Roman Empire now, or you're part of the Persian Empire. Speak Latin or speak Persian. That just doesn't occur. The Arabs conquer northern Africa, but they don't conquer sub-Saharan Africa. So we don't see Arabic as a overarching language. Instead, languages developed independently, and they developed without this foreign influence. This is really going to be the case until the 1800s. So what is this unity I was alluding to? Well, despite diversity, African cultures do display a certain amount of common features. These smaller traditions, there are things that run through them. And this cultural unity, some scholars have called Africanity. One of these common cultural features, for example, is kingship. Kings ritually isolated, they oversee societies, and these societies are arranged in different age groups. This is one of our examples. What are some other examples? Well, other common features: cultivation with hoes and digging sticks, the use of rhythm in African music, where we see drums being used quite a bit, distinctive character in African music and how it's used in social rituals, and then the functions of dancing and mask wearing in those rituals is also common. So how did this unity develop? Well, one overarching hypothesis basically says that the people of sub-Saharan Africa all developed from people who formerly occupied the southern Saharan desert, who migrated to that region. And that could have been basically, that southern migration may have been driven by changes in climate at the end of the last ice age, all the way till about 5000 BC. Now, moving kind of closer to our time period, not 5000 BCE, but around 2000 to 1000 BCE, we see Sub-Saharan Africa entering what we might say is the Iron Age. And so we begin to see agriculture spread southward in Sub-Saharan Africa, ironworking actually spreading southward. And we do not know exactly how that ironworking could have spread from the regions that had it in the Middle East. For example, the Hittites, who develop it in the Middle East and then it spreads elsewhere. It seems to suggest that this may have been an independent discovery in Sub-Saharan Africa, this discovery of iron, and then it spread as a result of what we call the Bantu migrations, and that's kind of what we're going to move on to next. So here is a map, of the Bantu migrations. Bantu people originating most likely near Nigeria, and then spreading southward and eastward across Sub-Saharan Africa. So you see there the darker arrows, the spread by about the year 1000 BC, and then further the spread of Bantu by 500 CE. So here's a little bit of information in this. Original homeland in the area of modern Nigeria and Cameroon, spread south and east, occurred throughout the first millennium. So now we move, that's kind of what we have for Sub-Saharan Africa. Just leave you with a point. Keep in mind that this Bantu migration not only could spread culture and language, and these languages branched off of it, but also spread knowledge, for example, of working iron. And that idea, that the kind of concept of spreading ideas we see in Sub-Saharan Africa, but we also see it in all the regions we've been talking about up to this point. So that's what we're going to really talk about next. Now, the spread of ideas sometimes is very easy to see, especially in religions that develop much later, like Buddhism, Christianity, Islam. We see that spread for sure, but in some cases, it is extremely difficult or impossible to figure out how ideas spread, especially, I'm doing that a lot. I apologize. Pause the video, rewind if you ever need. Sometimes it's almost impossible to determine how ideas spread, especially before we have written evidence of this. So let me give you some examples that the book gives you. Pigs and coins. It's coming. Oh, and one too many, as usual. So let's talk about pigs. We see in many different societies that eating pork or pig meat is restricted or prohibited, a lot of time because of religious belief. So we see this in Southeast Asia, ancient Egypt, and in Eastern Iran. So how did this come to be? Because we know pigs were domesticated in Southeast Asia. Well, we hypothesize that these religious prohibitions traveled together between societies, so that pigs were seen as somehow holy or ritual, eaten only for ritual. We see that in Mesopotamia, we see it in Egypt, and odds are that, or our belief is that in Judaism, the belief that in Judaism that you should not eat pork, that probably came from prohibitions in Egypt, where it was seen as connected with the gods. And then we see Islam take on the same prohibition. So we see this kind of spreading from place to place and culture to culture throughout time. Now, coins. We see the invention of coins, but we don't exactly know how it spread from one society to another. In the Mediterranean world, we know this started in Anatolia and spread there, from there to Europe, North Africa, and India. But we also see China using coins. Well, we don't have any hard evidence saying that the coins spread from Anatolia all the way to China. Did it? We don't have any way of knowing. Was it likely? Possibly, as the Chinese traded with people in India or with maybe some Persians. But we do see it kind of develop. It could have developed independently, much like the development of iron in Sub-Saharan Africa. So just kind of keep this in mind as we are looking for more and more historical evidence. One thing we can track is the spread of religion. Now, not all religion, mind you. Some early religions it is difficult because it is from a time before we see writing. But the spread of ideas in a deliberate and organized fashion that we can trace is something that comes about, really, it's a phenomenon of the first millennium CE, where we can see the spread of Buddhism and Christianity. And then later than those two, about starting, of course, in the year 600 and forward, we can trace the spread of Islam. Now, we're not going to trace the spread of Islam here because we aren't covering that yet. But we will look at Buddhism and Christianity. So the spread of Buddhism is facilitated by royal sponsorship, basically. This idea of the state saying, hey, we're Buddhist, you should be too. So we see this in India, especially with Mauryan King Ashoka. We see it with the Kushan Empire, which actively supported Buddhism as well. And we know that it spread from these empires outward. They sent missionaries elsewhere to spread this religion. The Mauryans sent missionaries as far as Syria, Egypt, and Macedonia, as well as Southeast Asia. We also know that as people traded in these regions, they brought their religion with them. China, it spread to China through missionaries and travelers. For example, the Chinese monk Faxian wrote a detailed account of his travels throughout India and came back bringing back Buddhist ideas with him. Here's a little bit more information on what I was already telling you about missionaries to other lands. And of course, we do know there are multiple types of Buddhism, and so we see different types become dominant or popular in different areas. And that brings us to our last topic, the spread of Christianity. The spread of Christianity is a good way to illustrate the connection between religion, trade, and politics. We've kind of looked a little bit at that in our lecture from the past couple of days. We saw that Christianity was very much connected with the political realm, especially in the Byzantine Empire, and it could be used as a political tool, especially, let's say, against Persians who practice Zoroastrianism. We'll see a little bit more of that in this next couple slides. This map gives you a good idea of the spread of Christianity. So let's look at it a little bit more. There's two places we can really look to see the spread of Christianity: Armenia and Ethiopia. And this tool of Christianity being used as a political tool, really to head off the spread of Iranian power. So Armenia was basically an important trading post that was located between the Byzantine Empire. If you follow my mouse, you can see it here, and the Iranian states here. So whoever controlled Armenia not only controlled an important trading post, but it also prevented the spread of the other. So Christians basically get in there. They start spreading Christianity in Armenia. They succeed actually in developing the Armenian Apostolic Church, which basically became the center for Armenian cultural life. And in doing so, they earned allegiance of this region to the Byzantine Empire and the Mediterranean Christian world of this time period. In Ethiopia, we see a similar link. Basically, this region of East Africa was open to trade, and Mediterranean Christian states wanted to get a part of that market. In order to do so, they sent missionaries to Ethiopia again and again, and it's really takes hold. We have some evidence that it takes hold with Syrian missionaries, some who actually survive martyrdom and actually come to lead Ethiopia, and then spread Christianity that way. And we see this with Frumentius, who basically sought out Christians as merchants when he came to power as acting king of Ethiopia, and he basically establishes Christian communities in Ethiopia. He's eventually actually travels back to his homeland and is sent back to Ethiopia to be a bishop and lead those Christian communities. But Ethiopia became one of the strongholds of Christianity and is home to a large Orthodox Christian community. But by tying Ethiopia to Christian trading partners, this cut off the possibility of trade with the Iranian state. That's it, guys. That's all. You have a study guide to be working on. You have notes that you need to be reviewing. I will be conducting a two brief study sessions Wednesday after class and Thursday morning before your test on Thursday. It'll be AP style, so get ready for it. Let me know if you have any questions. Shoot me any email. Have a wonderful day. I hope this wasn't too long for you. Have a good one.